Trump hitting free traders again yesterday. Take a listen.
We're losing $500 billion in trade with China. Who the hell cares if there's a trade war?
Who the hell cares? Well, the presumptive nominee calling for a 35% tariff on imports into the U.S. from American companies who outsource to Mexico and a 45% tax on imported Chinese goods. Here to weigh in the possibility of a Trump trade war is Steve Forbes, Forbes media chairman and editor-in-chief. Well, count me as one who does care a lot about a trade war. I mean, the editor of the Wall Street Journal, a lot of other smart people who've seen these things say that trade wars can lead to depressions. And in fact, that's probably what led to the Depression in the 1930s.
It certainly triggered it in the early 1930s, followed by massive tax increases in various countries around the world. And so the shooting came 10 years later, but the world was totally disrupted. There are means in place to deal with trade violations, which China does routinely. So it's a matter of enforcing existing trade agreements. Having a trade war, everyone is a loser.
Right.
Just think of 45%, David, as a 45% sales tax.
It is like a tax. It is a tax. Now, you, Steve, are in touch with people that are in touch with him on a pretty regular basis. Can't his friends, people who are not of the never Trump crowd, talk to him about this and say, look, this is madness. If you get into a trade war, it could hurt us tremendously, even more than we're already hurting.
Yeah, and then the idea that, well, we have a $500 billion trade deficit, that's not a profit. That just means we buy something and then they buy something here. Instead of a product, they buy a security or they buy a treasury bill. I don't mind them owning treasury bills. If we ever got in a real confrontation with China, we could say those nice treasury bonds you have make great wallpaper. You know, so
but again, can you talk? Is he teachable on this subject?
I don't know, and he certainly has been flexible on other subjects like taxation and things like that. So in terms of the key thing is on trade is enforcing the existing rules. You don't steal our intellectual property, you don't borrow our products and services, no more cyber warfare. Those things we can deal with the tools we have today.
He says, of course, that we haven't, that they've been, eating our lunch on these subjects in the past, and therefore we need a whole new way of bargaining with them. That's a legitimate point, right?
We don't need to bargain with them. We can say, you violated it. Here are the penalties. Here's what we're going to do.
We want to move on to Venezuela because this is an interesting subject. It is inching closer to literal economic collapse. The South American country is home to the largest oil reserves in the world, but the resource-rich nation's socialist policies are leading to widespread poverty and chaos. Steve, is it conceivable that what Bernie Sanders is suggesting we do here would lead to the same kind of chaos they see there?
Socialism means shortages. As Margaret Thatcher says, it doesn't work when you run out of other people's money. In this case, the collapse of oil prices means that Venezuela has no other kind of economy, and they're paying the price for it. And the government, the ministers are living very richly, very nicely, while people are literally dying in the hospitals, can't get treatments, can't get even blood transfusions. It is a total disaster, and you just look at North Korea and Cuba, where that leads.
But people see Venezuela. They see it in Latin America. It may have the richest oil reserves in the world, but it still looks like a third world country, more and more like a third world country. And they say, there's no comparison. You know what Bernie Sanders is talking about is kind of a European socialism. We could live with that. To which you say?
Well, recession is not a pleasant thing, even if you're a rich country, when you're going down instead of up. His policies and her policies would lead to a severe recession. And so you may start from a higher base, as we did in 1932 or 1929 with the Great Depression, which we were talking about earlier. You may start from a higher base, but it's still a very painful and disastrous situation.
Bernie Sanders, at least, is honest in terms of calling himself a socialist, maybe a democratic socialist, but she does not. Would you consider her policies, particularly since she's been pulled to the left with Bernie, socialist economic policies?
I'll call it socialism light. Bernie's out in the open. She's still in the closet on her socialism. Bill Clinton was a centrist, more leftist, but sort of a centrist. She does not have an inner Bill. Her inner beliefs are more socialistic than they are Billistic.